I didn't just want to hurt him. I wanted him to feel the exact same soul-shattering agony he'd inflicted on me. I wanted him to experience that terrifying lurch when the world is ripped out from under you, that feeling of your heart being clawed out of your chest while you're still awake and breathing. So, I slept with his best friend. And for a brief, glorious, incandescent moment, it felt like victory. It felt like justice. I felt powerful, like I had finally balanced the scales of our broken world. But here's the ugly truth. They never tell you about revenge. The price is always higher than you expect. And in my obsessive quest to burn his world to the ground, I ended up incinerating my own, leaving myself as the sole occupant of the wreckage. 7 years. It sounds so simple when you say it, but 7 years isn't just a number on a calendar. It's an entire universe. Liam and I had constructed a reality together brick by brick. It was a world woven with inside jokes so ancient we'd long forgotten their origins, whispered promises of a future in a little house with a ridiculously cheerful blue door, and the profound, easy silence that can only exist between two people who have witnessed every version of each other, the brilliant and the broken. We weren't just a couple, we were an institution. Liam and me was a fundamental truth, as reliable and constant as the sun rising in the east. The life we built was breathtaking in its ordinary perfection. He knew the precise moment I was about to wake up, placing a hot cup of coffee on my nightstand to greet me. A little cream, no sugar, a ritual of love. Saturdays were our sacred pilgrimage to the farmer's market, not because we needed organic kale, but because we needed the ritual itself. The feeling of his hand resting protectively on the small of my back as we navigated the crowds was my anchor. For our first anniversary, he created a playlist of painfully cheesy 80s rock ballads. We'd blast them on long road trips, singing at the absolute top of our lungs, gloriously off-key and deliriously happy. It was our life. It was our song. And I was foolish enough to believe we would be singing it forever. And then there was Mark, Liam's best friend since kindergarten. But he was my friend, too. He was the essential third musketeer in our tight-knit trio from the very beginning. Mark wasn't just a friend, he was family. The big brother I never had. I can still hear his booming laugh echoing through the empty rooms of our first apartment as we struggled and failed to maneuver a ridiculously oversized sofa through the doorway. He was a fixture at every holiday, carving the Thanksgiving turkey with a theatrical seriousness that made us all laugh. When I came down with a flu so vicious I couldn't lift my head from the pillow, Liam was away on a work trip. It was Mark who showed up, unasked, with a week's worth of homemade soup. He was a constant, a bedrock. I trusted him with my life just as much as I trusted Liam. And that unwavering trust was my first catastrophic mistake. The foundation of that beautiful, ordinary life didn't just crack, it was annihilated in a single, devastating moment. I was supposed to be in Chicago for a 3-day marketing conference, but on the second day, the final keynote speaker had a family emergency. The entire event wrapped up a day early. I was ecstatic. I remember grinning like a fool at the O'Hare airport, frantically booking the first available flight to surprise Liam. An entire extra evening together. A bonus night. I landed around 9 p.m. The urge to text him was strong, but the thought of the surprise was the whole point. I pictured his face, the slow bloom of delight. I grabbed a cab home, my heart pounding with giddy, joyful anticipation. As the taxi turned onto our quiet, tree-lined street, I saw a familiar silver sedan parked out front. Mark's car. For a fleeting second, I just felt a surge of warmth. Oh, good, I thought. They're having a guys' night. I'll get to surprise them both. I paid the driver, practically skipping up the path as I slipped my key into the lock as quietly as I could. The house was dark, utterly silent, except for the faint, bluish flicker of the TV in the living room. But the TV was muted. The only sound was a low, rhythmic, almost guttural noise coming from upstairs, from our bedroom. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. It wasn't a conscious thought, not yet. It was a primal, physical reaction. The fine hairs on my arms stood on end. My stomach twisted into a dense, painful knot. I set my travel bag down on the floor with excruciating slowness, as if any sudden movement would make the nightmare real. Every survival instinct I possessed was screaming at me to just turn around, to walk back out that front door and pretend I was never there. Unsee, unhear, unknow. But my feet felt like they were bolted to the floorboards. I crept up the stairs, each step a distinct universe of dread. The sound grew louder, more distinct. It was unmistakable. It was the sickening, intimate sound of betrayal. My hand trembled violently as I reached for the doorknob of our bedroom, our bedroom. I prayed with every fiber of my being that I was wrong. Maybe the TV was on upstairs. Maybe they were just wrestling over a video game. Maybe anything but this. I pushed the door open, and the world I knew ceased to exist. It wasn't some nameless stranger in our bed. It was her, a woman from his office he'd once flippantly described as annoyingly perky. And him, Liam, my Liam, twisted together in our sheets on my side of the bed. Everything stopped. Time, my heart, my ability to breathe. All I could hear was a piercing, high-pitched ringing in my ears. They scrambled apart, their faces a grotesque mask of pure panic. Her eyes were wide with raw, animal terror, but it was his face that truly shattered me. It wasn't just guilt. It was the pathetic, cornered look of a child caught stealing. He started stammering the pathetic, universal script. "It's not what it looks like. Baby, I can explain." The words were meaningless static. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry. I just stood there in the doorway, a ghost at my own funeral, gazing at the smoldering wreckage of my life. I remember noticing one small, surreal detail. He was still wearing the watch I had bought him for his 30th birthday. The back was engraved with the words, "My time is yours." The irony was so acidic, it almost made me laugh out loud. I turned around without a single word, walked back down the stairs I had just ascended, picked up my bag, and walked out the front door. I had no idea where I was going. I just knew with absolute certainty that I could never go back. The life I had, the woman I was, she died in that bedroom. And in her place, something new and cold and terrifyingly sharp was beginning to awaken. The first few days were a nauseating blur of sterile motels, stale coffee, and the constant, shrill buzzing of my phone. Hundreds of calls from Liam, a relentless barrage of texts. "I'm so sorry, you're my entire world, please just let me explain." Then the texts from Mark began to arrive. "I'm so sorry about Liam. I'm here for you, whatever you need. What he did is unforgivable." The hypocrisy was so thick and suffocating, I could almost feel it coating my lungs. Did he know? Was he covering for his best friend? The question festered in my mind like an open wound. I didn't answer anyone. I couldn't form the words. The pain was too primal, too raw. It wasn't just sadness, it was a physical agony, a hollowing out of my very being. Every cherished memory was now contaminated, poisoned by the truth. Our first apartment, those sun-drenched road trips, the fantasy of the little house with the blue door. It was all a meticulously crafted lie. But beneath the pain, the humiliation burned hotter. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had made a fool of me in the most intimate way possible. Sleep offered no escape. Every time I closed my eyes, the scene replayed itself in high definition. But as the initial shock began to recede, a different emotion started to crystallize in its place. It was cold, hard, and as sharp as a shard of glass. It was pure, unadulterated rage. My mind raced with the usual revenge fantasies. Keying his precious sports car, setting a bonfire with his designer clothes, exposing him in a brutal, detailed post that would go viral on social media. But it all felt so petty, so small. A paint job is an inconvenience. New clothes can be bought. A social media scandal is just digital gossip for a week. No, I didn't want to inconvenience him. I wanted to annihilate him. I wanted him to feel that same sickening, gut-wrenching drop in his stomach, that feeling of the very ground beneath his feet giving way. I wanted to surgically remove something from his life that he could never, ever get back. I was lying on a lumpy, stained motel bed, staring at the water-damaged ceiling, when the plan finally materialized. It didn't streak like lightning. It slithered into my mind, elegant and venomous. So simple, so symmetrical, so perfect in its cruelty. Mark. It was never just about sleeping with someone else. It was about taking the one person Liam thought was unequivocally his best friend, his brother, the person he trusted more than anyone else on the planet. Taking Mark was not just revenge. It was a strategic demolition of Liam's entire emotional support system, a betrayal for a betrayal, an eye for an eye, a soul for a soul. The thought sent a jolt of something I hadn't felt in days. Purpose, a sense of control. The plan began to form in my mind, not with the heat of passion, but with the cold, detached clarity of a military strategist. This wasn't going to be an impulsive, sloppy mistake. This was going to be a calculated, precision strike aimed directly at the heart of his world. I finally picked up my phone, my fingers surprisingly steady. I scrolled past the dozens of missed calls from Liam and found Mark's last text. "I'm here for you if you need anything." I took a long, deep breath and began to type. "Mark, I really need a friend right now. Can we please talk?" The reply came almost instantly. "Of course, anything. Just tell me where you are." I gave him the name of a quiet, dark bar downtown. As I got ready, I stared at my reflection in the cracked motel mirror. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Her eyes were hollowed out by grief, but deep within them a flicker of something new and unsettling ignited, a dangerous glint. I was no longer the victim cowering in a motel room. That faint voice in the back of my head, the one that sounded like the old, naive me, was screaming, "This is a terrible, monstrous idea. This will solve nothing and only create more pain." But another voice, colder, louder, and far more persuasive, drowned it out completely. "He deserves it." That voice told me that fairness was a fairy tale for children. He had proven that. Now I was just balancing the scales. This wasn't about healing. This was about retribution, and he was about to feel my full, unrestrained fury. The bar was a cavern of shadows, smelling of aged leather, spilled whiskey, and quiet desperation. It was the perfect stage for the tragedy I was about to direct. I spotted Mark in a booth at the far back, hunched over a beer, radiating anxiety. He looked terrible. His face was pale, his eyes shot through with red threads of worry. He was already carrying the weight of his friend's guilt, a burden he thought was his to share. He had no earthly idea I was about to crush him with a far heavier one. He shot to his feet the moment he saw me, enveloping me in a long, comforting hug that, just a week ago, would have felt like the safest place on earth. Tonight, it just felt like the first move in a chess game. "I am so, so sorry," he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with genuine emotion. "I still can't believe he would do this to you." I let myself cry. They were real tears, born from real agonizing pain, but now they were also a weapon. I allowed him to lead me to the booth, to order me a strong drink, and to hold my hand as I recounted the entire sordid story. I watched his face as I spoke, saw his deep sympathy curdle into a protective anger on my behalf. He was completely, utterly on my side. He was walking directly into the trap I had so carefully laid. "I just don't understand," I said, letting my voice crack at the precisely calculated moment. 7 years, Mark. How could he just throw it all away like it was nothing? "He's an idiot," he seethed, his jaw tight with fury. "A selfish, stupid, unforgivable idiot. You deserve so much better." "I just feel so completely alone," I whispered, looking down at our intertwined hands as if they were my only anchor. "You're not alone," he said, his voice dropping, squeezing my hand tighter. "I promise you, I will always be here for you." That was it. That was the opening I needed. Over the next 2 hours, with the help of 2 more whiskeys, I meticulously blurred the lines between friendship and something more. I allowed my grief to masquerade as affection. I let my desperate need for comfort look like I needed him and only him. We eventually stopped talking about Liam, and the conversation shifted, guided by me, to us, to our long history, to the connection we shared. By the time we finally left the bar, the air between us was thick and charged with unspoken possibilities. He walked me to my motel room, his arm wrapped securely around my shoulders. Standing there at the door, I knew this was it, the point of no return. "Thank you, Mark," I said, looking up at him, letting my eyes fill with a carefully constructed vulnerability. "I honestly don't know what I would have done tonight without you." "Anytime," he said, his voice raspy and thick with emotion. I didn't invite him in. I didn't have to. I just leaned in and kissed him. It was soft and hesitant at first, and then it became something else entirely. Desperate, hungry, and fueled by a cocktail of expensive whiskey and cheap vengeance. Inside that sterile, anonymous motel room, the act itself was a hollow, mechanical blur. There was no passion, no intimacy. It was a cold, calculated transaction. And as it happened, my inner monologue was a frigid, repeating mantra. This is for the 7 years. This is for making me feel worthless. This is for our bed, our home, our future. In the midst of it, I felt a surge of dark, intoxicating power. I had done it. The score was finally even. He took my heart, so I took his brother. In that moment, I felt like I had won. But the second it was over, a crushing, absolute silence descended upon the room. The triumphant high evaporated instantly. Mark lay beside me on his back, staring at the ceiling, a look of utter horror dawning on his face. The full, catastrophic weight of what he had just done, betraying his best friend since kindergarten, was crashing down on him in real time. And me? I felt nothing. A void. The power of the victory, the sense of justice, it was all gone. In its place was just a vast,
cold, terrifying emptiness. I had my revenge, but I hadn't fixed a single broken piece of myself. I just smashed everything else. The momentary satisfaction was already decaying, replaced by the sickening realization that I had just pulled the pin on a grenade, and we were all standing directly on top of it. The morning after was brutal. I awoke to the depressing gray light filtering through the cheap motel curtains and the soul-crushing weight of regret. Mark was already gone. A single crumpled piece of motel stationery was on the nightstand. "I'm so sorry." Two pathetic words that couldn't even begin to scratch the surface of the wreckage we had created. My glorious victory tasted like ash in my mouth. The first casualty was Mark. He didn't just disappear, he became a ghost. In the beginning, he tried calling me a dozen times a day, but I never picked up. What was there to say? His texts were a frantic jumble of guilt, confusion, and panic. "We need to talk. I don't know what to do. Please, I'm begging you." I ignored them all. He was a necessary casualty in my war. A mutual friend later told me that he was a complete and utter wreck, that he was being eaten alive by a guilt so profound it was physically destroying him. For 2 agonizing weeks, I let the silence fester. I let them both stew in their separate hells. Then I realized for my revenge to be truly complete, for the pain to land with the force I intended, Liam had to know. The bomb I had so carefully constructed needed to be detonated. I sent Liam a single text. "We need to talk face to face." We met at a soulless, sterile coffee shop, a place with no memories. He looked ravaged, thinner, with dark, sunken hollows under his eyes. The second I sat down, he launched into a desperate, pathetic flood of apologies, promises, and justifications. He loved me. He'd made a terrible mistake. He would do anything to fix it. I let him talk. I sipped my black coffee and watched him with a chilling detachment, letting him construct this fragile little house of hope, brick by hopeful brick. And then, when he was finished, I took a sledgehammer to it. When he finally paused, breathless, looking at me with the pleading eyes of a condemned man, I leaned forward across the table. "I'm not here to talk about us, Liam. I'm here to tell you that I slept with Mark. I have never, in my entire life, seen a human face change so completely and so horrifyingly. The hope, the desperation, the fragile optimism, it all evaporated in an instant. His face went utterly blank with shock, then twisted in a grotesque knot of confusion. "What?" he whispered, the word barely audible. I repeated, enunciating every single word like a hammer blow, "I slept with Mark." I had expected him to get angry, to yell, to explode. But after a brief, terrifying flash of rage in his eyes, something else took over. A tidal wave of pure, absolute devastation. Betrayal from me was a blow he had been bracing for. But betrayal from his best friend, his brother, was a knife in the back he never ever saw coming. "No," he said, shaking his head in frantic denial. "You're lying. You're just saying that to hurt me." "Am I?" I asked, my voice devoid of all emotion. "Call him. Ask him yourself." He didn't need to. He saw the cold, hard truth in my eyes. In that moment, I realized I hadn't just broken his heart. I had destroyed his entire world. The very light in his eyes it went out. He looked like a broken stranger. I had done it. I had my revenge. And I had never felt more disgusting in my entire life. The fallout was catastrophic. Liam confronted Mark. I heard later from a mutual friend that it wasn't a fight, just a quiet, brutal execution. A brotherhood that had spanned more than 20 years, dissolved in a single toxic conversation. They would never speak again. I'd taken something I once admired, their friendship, and I had twisted it into a weapon to shatter both of them. And me, I was utterly, completely alone. The momentary satisfaction gave way to a profound, gnawing pain that was so much worse than the initial heartbreak. Friends scattered, forced to choose sides. Some sided with Liam, disgusted and horrified by my calculated cruelty. The others, the ones who stayed, looked at me differently now, with a hint of fear in their eyes. I was no longer the tragic victim. I was the villain of the story. My life became a prison of my own making. The anxiety and depression were a crushing weight. I couldn't stop replaying the look of utter devastation on Liam's face. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd done to Mark, who had been a good and loyal friend before I turned him into a pawn in my sick game. My desperate attempt to take back control had been.
It's been a year now. A year of deafening silence and self-imposed exile. I moved to a new city, got a new job, and desperately tried to start over. But it turns out you can't outrun the ghosts you create yourself. They follow you. I never heard from Liam again. I heard through the grapevine that he sold the house with the blue door we never got and moved across the country. I genuinely, truly hope he found some measure of peace. Mark is still back home. I see pictures of him on social media sometimes, posted by mutual friends. He's smiling in them, but the smile never quite reaches his eyes. I know he's in therapy. We are forever linked by that one catastrophic, shared mistake, but we are strangers. I took a friendship he cherished more than anything and twisted it into the biggest regret of his life. That's a heavy burden for him to carry, and it's a heavier one for me to live with. I'm in therapy too. And I'm slowly, painfully learning that what I called justice was just my own pain dressed up as power. Here's the devastating truth about betrayal. It carves a hole in you, a void so profound you become desperate to fill it with anything. For me, that thing was revenge. I thought hurting him, breaking him, would somehow heal me. But that's not how it works. You can't heal your own wound by stabbing someone else. You just end up with two people bleeding out on the floor. That intoxicating flash of triumph I felt, it was a lie, a dangerous mirage. It doesn't lead to satisfaction or closure. It just leads to long-term radiating pain for everyone involved. I didn't take back control. I just surrendered to my worst, most destructive impulses. In the end, you become the very monster you were trying to slay. I know some of you watching this have felt that same fire, that same all-consuming need to get even. I know what it's like to believe that making them hurt is the only way to make your own hurting stop. So I have to ask, what would you have done? Am I a monster? Or was my reaction in some twisted way justified? Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're going through something like this, if you're standing on that same terrifying ledge I was on, I am begging you, please take a step back. Talk to someone, a therapist, a friend, a stranger. Scream into a pillow until your voice is gone. Do whatever you have to do to let that rage out without letting it take control. Don't let that fire consume you the way it did me. Because once you burn everything to the ground, you might discover you're the only one left standing in the ashes. And it is a very cold and very lonely place to be.